Nietzsche, Selected Aphorisms. Part 2. Mixed Opinions and Maxims. 89. Morality and its sacrifice. The origin of morality may be traced to two ideas. Quote, the community is of more value than the individual, unquote. And, quote, the permanent interest is to be preferred to the temporary, unquote. The conclusion drawn is that the permanent interest of the community is unconditionally to be set above the temporary interest of the individual, especially his momentary well-being, but also his permanent interest and even the prolongation of his existence. Even if the individual suffers by an arrangement that suits the mass, even if he is depressed and ruined by it, morality must be maintained and the victim brought to the sacrifice. Such a trend of thought arises, however, only in those who are not the victims, for in the victim's case it enforces the claim that the individual might be worth more than the many, and that the present enjoyment, the quote, moment in paradise, unquote, should perhaps be rated higher than a tame succession of untroubled or comfortable circumstances. But the philosophy of the sacrificial victim always finds voice too late, and so victory remains with morals and morality, which are really nothing more than the sentiment for the whole concept of morals under which one lives and has been reared. And reared not as an individual, but as a member of the whole, as a cipher in a majority. Hence it constantly happens that the individual makes himself into a majority by means of his morality. 130. Readers' insults. The reader offers a twofold insult to the author by praising his second book at the expense of his first, or vice versa, and by expecting the author to be grateful to him on that account. 137. The worst readers. The worst readers are those who act like plundering soldiers. They take out some things that they might use, cover the rest with filth and confusion, and blaspheme about the whole. 145. The value of honest books. Honest books make the reader honest, at least by exciting his hatred and aversion, which otherwise cunning cleverness knows so well how to conceal. Against a book, however, we let ourselves go, however restrained we may be in our relations with men. I can certainly think of one book by another author to which that sentiment might apply. 157. The most cutting criticism. We make the most cutting criticism of a man or a book when we indicate his or its ideal. 168. Praise of the aphorism. A good aphorism is too hard for the tooth of time, and is not worn away by all the centuries, although it serves as food for every epoch. Hence it is the greatest paradox in literature, the imperishable in the midst of change, the nourishment which always remains highly valued, as salt does, and never becomes stupid like salt. 200. Original. Original minds are distinguished not by being the first to see a new thing, but by seeing the old, well-known thing, which is seen and overlooked by everyone as something new. The first discoverer is usually that quite ordinary and unintellectual visionary, chance. 201. Error of philosophers. The philosopher believes that the value of his philosophy lies in the whole, in the structure. Posterity finds it in the stone with which he built, and with which, from that time forth, men will build oftener and better. In other words, in the fact that the structure may be destroyed and yet have value as material. 206. Why savants are nobler than artists. Science requires nobler natures than does poetry, natures that are more simple, less ambitious, more restrained, calmer, that think less of posthumous fame and can bury themselves in studies which, in the eye of the many, scarcely seem worthy of such a sacrifice of personality. There is another loss of which they are conscious, the nature of their occupation, its continual exaction of the greatest sobriety, weakens their will. The fire is not kept up so vigorously as on the hearths of poetic minds. As such, they often lose their strength and prime earlier than artists do. And, as has been said, they are aware of their danger. Under all circumstances they seem less gifted because they shine less, and thus they will always be rated below their value. 250. Reason for dislike. We become hostile to many an artist or writer, not because we notice in the end that he has duped us, but because he did not find more subtle means necessary to entrap us. 251. In parting. Not by the way one soul approaches another, but by the way it separates, do I recognize its relationship and homogeneity with the other. 298. Virtue was not invented by the Germans. Goethe's nobleness and freedom from envy, Beethoven's fine hermetical resignation, Mozart's cheerfulness and grace of heart, Handel's unbending manliness and freedom under the law, Bach's confident and luminous inner life, such as does not even need to renounce glamour and success. Are these qualities peculiarly German? If they are not, they at least prove to what goal Germans should strive and to what they can attain. 309. Taking sides against ourselves. Our followers never forgive us for taking sides against ourselves, for we seem in their eyes not only to be spurning their love, but to be exposing them to the charge of lack of intelligence. 325. Opinions. Most men are nothing and count for nothing until they have arrayed themselves in universal convictions and public opinions. This is in accordance with the tailor's philosophy, the apparel makes the man. Of exceptional men, however, it must be said, quote, the wearer primarily makes the apparel. Here opinions cease to be public and become something else than masks, ornament, and disguise. 341. Loving the master. The apprentice and the master love the master in different ways. 346. Being misunderstood. When one is misunderstood, generally it is impossible to remove a particular misunderstanding. This point must be recognized to save superfluous expenditure of energy in self-defense. 404. How duty acquires a glamour. You can change a brazen duty into gold in the eyes of all by always performing something more than you have promised. 405. Prayer to mankind. Quote, forgive us our virtues, unquote. So we should pray to mankind. Forgive us our virtues. Forgive us our virtues. End of Nietzsche Selected Aphorisms, Part 2. Mixed Opinions and Maxims, 1879.